Hey everyone, welcome back to the Naked Wealth Podcast. So excited to have you here today and excited about our guest today, Alyssa Young. Her blog is called the Unlimited Refills blog. Alyssa Young is the mastermind behind her blog, as well as she owns a business, Katura Incorporated. She is an author, and also she co-hosted the top 3% global podcast in mental health. She's on a mission to empower individuals to replenish their personal well-being with the same dedication as a morning cup of coffee. I love that. She's passionate about self-care and personal growth, and this shines through her words and inspires readers nationwide. So, Alyssa, I really appreciate you being here today. Tell me a little bit about your blog, the content, what got you started, and a little bit more about that mental health.
Thank you so much, Jen. I am so happy to be here. This is, of course, the blog being like my baby. It is one of my favorite things to talk about and how it got started. I realized the care and the attention that I always put into making sure that I had a full cup of coffee, doing so many things. I've always been a go-getter from the very start of my life. And so caffeine, was always kind of incorporated into that. I was sitting in Starbucks. I know the exact location right off of Park and Seminole. I was sitting there for about 8 hours, and it turns out that if you sit in Starbucks for so long, they will actually refill your coffee at no charge. So I'm sitting there, and I had known that I wanted to do a blog because my age, so the blog is almost 3 years old. I'm 26 now, and at 23, I felt like I had lived a lot of lives, which it's so funny to say now at 26. I'm like, wow, from 23 to 26, I also feel like I've lived a lot of lives and have a lot more to live. But I wanted to share kind of my, what I would call my trauma into triumph with others. And I had started it more as like a passion project. I had no idea the impact that it would have on an audience nationally and now internationally as it's reached people in many different countries. And the reason I wanted to share was I remember, talking about mental health. They always talk about journaling. And I was like, okay, cool. This can kind of be like my online journal. And maybe a couple people will read this. Maybe a couple people like my mom, my aunt, that's kind of what I was thinking. That's not what happened. The blog got very quickly recognized, and I started, getting some emails and different comments and views, and people started asking me to write about certain topics. And when I was putting out topics such as, going through an eating disorder, being told that, if you have anxiety, you'll never be successful, I just knew that there was so much power in that to be able to impact others around me for a positive change. And that's where I really saw the value that I was able to bring to people, especially in the mental health area. But so to kind of circle back with the Unlimited Refills blog, that's where the name came about. They will give you unlimited refills in Starbucks if you sit there for so long, like I always did. And that's where the name came from. And I don't think I would change it because it's very authentically me.
No, I love it. I was like, that's the greatest title. I've had a couple different titles or people who have their name on their Instagram that I'm like, ooh, that's it. Why didn't I think of that? It's so great. And the Unlimited Refills is one of them. So how long do you have to sit at Starbucks for free refills?
Gosh, I mean, they will give you free refills as soon as you down that first cup of coffee. So the quicker you drink it, the more refills you get. For me, I don't do this as much anymore, but I would say I used to be consuming maybe like 4 ventis in a day, which is so bad. It's so bad for cortisol levels. It is not good for stress.
I was going to say that. I was saying, hold on, you just said anxiety, which I'm going to go there next. But then you said you're really a coffee junkie there for a little bit. So
Right. And I mean, I love coffee and I enjoy my morning cup of coffee and I drink it throughout the day, to kind of segue a little bit too. Before I'd gotten into business, I had started in nursing school. So I was a certified nursing assistant and worked at an assisted living facility. I was actually working back-to-back shifts. So I was going 16 hours a day with no break. So coffee was kind of the lifeline for me. And that just kind of fed into, sitting at Starbucks for 8 hours at
So
a
in
time while I
terms
was doing my business.
the blog and your story. So can you take us down the road a bit on your journey with anxiety and mental health? And just tell us a little bit about that. So, in terms of what is it you really wanted to share through the blog and how has your story helped other people?
Yeah. So, what I really wanted to share through the blog, I actually make a direct quote. And I had worked under or beside an executive who had told me and had actually posted it out publicly that you can never be successful in this life if you struggle with anxiety. And from a very young age, I did. I was that child in school who, was very quiet, was very shy, had a great group of friends. I was very thankful for that. I loved taking the honors and the AP classes, and I loved going to school. And the one thing that, was a little bit harder though in school was I did not like getting up and giving public presentations. And that is one of the things that they don't tell you you're going to do a lot of when you are in a leadership program like I was. I was in the CEL program, which is the Center for Education and Leadership. So I graduated with that proudly in high school. Kind of I want to say in my 10th grade year, my family and I really recognized the issue that I was having with anxiety. And anytime I would have to prepare a presentation to give in school, either the night before or both, the night before and the morning of, I would go into a pretty severe panic attack. My mother being a nurse, she has experience with these things, but it's a little bit different when it's your kid, right? And, hyperventilating, not being able to breathe, crying, it was just not sustainable for us. It was not sustainable for me to be going to the hospital, to be out of school. I mean, I think just I want to say in my 10th grade year alone, I missed over 35 days of school due to anxiety. So we finally did what's called a 504 accommodation plan. And that is kind of a legal agreement between you and the school, a guidance counselor, and typically an attorney. Mine was very curated to me. And actually, looking back on it, I'm like, how did they even get this through the system? But essentially, a teacher could not, by law, ask me to give a public presentation. So when I had that 504, it was kind of like my safety blanket. I was like, okay, now a teacher can't ask me to give a presentation. And, the panic attacks were still there, but I didn't have as much panic with the presentations because I didn't have to give them anymore. And I kind of thought in my mind that 504 is going to follow me for the rest of my life. I'm never going to have to give a public presentation. I'm never going to have to speak in front of people. In college, I took speech online, which, I mean, that's amazing for a college to offer. But looking back, that probably didn't help as much. When I had started the blog and the impact that it was making around people, I was getting asked to start speaking at different events. And I remember my first event, it was a women's conference. And I just said yes. I was terrified. I was scared. I remember, I think it was a week before, I'm like, there is no way I am going to be able to get through this. The second I got up on stage, the AV equipment wasn't working. And I'm up there. It was very awkward. But when all was said and done, all of my anxiety and my fear went away. And that's when I knew that I was really in alignment with where I was supposed to be in the impact that I was creating. So I feel like because I was able to really lean into my mental health a little bit more, I was able to really find, my purpose and my passion, which was to continue to impact others around me, but also share the struggles of mental health because we've all been there and we all have a lot to talk about. And that was something that I didn't see enough of when I was in high school. And I feel like if I would have had a resource like that in high school, like I've had people, reach out to me that are, in high school, in early college, I might have been in a different position than I was, than I am today. But I also wouldn't change what I went through, because if I changed what I went through and the struggles that I went through, I may not be here being able to share my story.
Yeah, I was thinking the irony is that you're here on a podcast, but it sounds to me like what you're saying is that as you realized your passion and realized your purpose, that just eases the burden of it to a great degree, and you're able to kind of push forward through. I'm curious because I have teenage daughters, and I have a couple who suffer, deal with a significant level of anxiety. And with them, anxiety looks different for each of them, first of all. So I think, to use the blanket term anxiety, sometimes it's situational. Sometimes you're not even thinking about anything and you have a panic attack. I think it can look so many different ways. And I think a lot of times, in how do you move forward? How do you not miss those 10 days of school? How do you take care of your anxiety? There's a lot of, feels like throwing jello at a wall a lot of times, in that you're just like, all right, well, let's try this therapy and that therapy and this and that. Are there any strategies you found that worked for you, or maybe not even specific strategies, but concepts, or, I mean, I see exactly what you're saying. And I think this will be the case, is the case a lot of times. If you're fully aligned with yourself and everything's congruent, it does make things easier, and maturity, I think, helps, and all those types of things. But what are some things you tried that worked or didn't work, or any advice you can give to people going through the process?
Yeah. So, for me, if I could, really look back at myself in my earlier years, some of the things that I did do were really deep breathing exercises. It was being able to honestly, and I know it's a long time, but I would count to 100 and then count all the way back down to scientifically level out my breathing, especially, not in the middle of hyperventilating, because that's not going to help when you're going through panic attacks. And, to put the disclaimer, panic attacks look different for everyone. Mine just happened to look like hyperventilating, crying. My safe place was the kitchen floor. I don't know if that's just where my mother would meet me there, but that ended up being my safe place for a while. And it looked like a lot of deep breathing. It looked like a hugging from my mom and her telling me it's going to be okay. It also was time. These panic attacks, again, are very, very, very different. They're all different among individuals. Some panic attacks maybe last 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Mine lasted hours. From start to end, it wasn't hours of hyperventilating, but, that's kind of where it started. And then to kind of ease down from that, these were, hours and hours on top of each other. So time really helped. I saw a huge difference in that, and being able to get out of a panic attack. I think having a support system is key. I have my go-to people. If, because even at 26, I get really stressed out. I have, of course, I've not had as many panic attacks as I did when I was younger, but having a support system, having an outlet, those are huge. Taking up working out for me was definitely a tool that I was able to utilize in high school and college, and having an outlet for stress. My first ever place that I actually lived on the beach in Redington Shores. And so I was able to go out there, and this was my first place on my own. I was able to go out there and ground myself in the sand. That really helped me. Or just sitting outside and having fresh air. Something that my mentor, Ryan, and the executive that I proudly work alongside of, she talks a lot about this, is what's called a state change. So it's changing the state of the environment around you, or removing yourself from that environment. So for instance, I'm sitting here recording with you right now at a desk, but if I wanted to do a state change, I would go into the other room and I'd probably start doing some jumping jacks. It really helps your mind to be able to not think about what we are, what we could be so focused on in that moment that's causing anxiety or stress. So my key things would be a support system, breathing techniques, and honestly, just making sure that you have the resources available to you. I have created such a support system that I know if I can't get a hold of one person, I'll be able to get a hold of the next after that. Um, and of course, there's so many different talks about with anxiety. We talk about medication and different techniques like that, or tools, as I'd like to call them. And I did go down that route. I did go down the medication route when I was younger, and it helped for a little bit. That, is not so much a part of my story anymore, which I'm very proud to say. But, sometimes medication is necessary. And my biggest thing is no one should ever be ashamed, because having medication and using it as a tool to me is still being that you're asking for help, you're seeking help.
I like your use of the word tools. I think that's key because a lot of times you might see, oh, well, so and so has anxiety and they do whatever, 3 hours of cognitive behavioral therapy a week and, one yoga class. And, there's not a prescriptive model. It's a tool belt, and you need to pull from it what you need in the moment. Maybe it's a hug from mom. Maybe it's a call to a friend. Maybe it's a state change, like you said. But I think as long as you have a full belt of tools, and medication may or may not be in there, that's a good good analogy. I think that I really like that. So
Yeah, we hear so many controversial conversations about medication that, I've kind of been on both sides of being on medication, not being on medication, but I still think if you are going to the doctor and actively seeking help, or however, you're able to do that, in my opinion, that's still a really big step to take, and a step that no one should ever feel ashamed of in taking.
yeah, the shame piece, there should be none. I mean, you walk down the street, and just because someone's not talking about it doesn't mean they're not dealing with it. I think it's far more common than we realize. And yeah, to some degree, I mean, some people it's really impacting like everyday life, and other more like degree. I think there's a spectrum of it.
That's the thing too, everything really is, as we're all individuals, everything is case by case. We are not meant to be a cookie cutter model of a human. We have human emotions and human feelings, and we have human reactions to things. And I think everyone will have different coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms, just like you said, is having like a full tool belt. Um, so, I think just like you said, we always called it my toolbox, but I love tool belt. Kind of makes me think of like the Batman belt and like all the cool things that were on that. And, I just think that's a really neat way to describe it. And also to remember that, as an individual, all of your needs are going to be different. And as long as you are able to, if you can recognize that you may have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of stress, and you find the strategy that works for you to help you, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me a bit about Katura. What are you doing next?
Yeah. So Katura Inc. So that is actually my middle name.
Very pretty. I like it.
It's a family name. It's been passed down. Katura for me is really the umbrella company that, holds the Unlimited Refills blog and also holds Alyssa Young as a brand. So that really is the S Corp business model. But through Katura Inc., I've actually been able to, similar to what I'm doing now, work alongside high level executives to be able to support them on the professional and the personal side of life. I found that is something that really resonates with me and where my passions are, joy and an approach that I really never saw. We don't think about, when things are out of equilibrium across, personal and professional, they both kind of bleed into each other. So if one's off, the other's going to be off, and vice versa. So that is where that got started. And yeah, I'm happy today with, the clients that I have and the people I get to work alongside of. It is such a cool kind of, 180 moment too, seeing where I was in high school and having anxiety and, not really knowing what the rest of my life was going to look like. to now being where I am today. It's really a neat thing to look back and realize that, you know, just because, and I'll, state it again, just because you struggle with anxiety does not mean that you will not be successful, as I was told the opposite.
Well, I've got about 19 years on you, so I can tell you that as things unfold, you're going to become more and more blown away by how the puzzle of your life just comes together. And I go, oh my gosh, like it's breathtaking. It really is. If you actually take the time, I don't know that everybody does take the time to stop and think about it or consider it, but you have these anxieties. And I think sometimes for me, that eases my anxiety when I can look back in retrospect and see, oh, I don't need to be worried about this because the last 40-something years have really come together so well. So I like that you made that comment. It's going to be even more mind-blowing when you get a few more years under your... Before we wrap, what is your favorite book?
Yeah, so my favorite book is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. This book was introduced to me by the executive that I am very proud to work alongside of, as well as my mentor, Ryan Halo. I just found this book to be, for one, it's a very easy read. It is not a long book, but it is so impactful and so powerful. One of the agreements out of the four that really resonated with me is don't take anything personally. For me, being a very emotional child and wanting to be, I was firstborn, type A, very, perfectionist mindset. And then I also took that personally. So I kind of took responsibility for the sky falling. So in that book, really learning not to take anything personally has really helped me as a leader and has, shown me that stuff is going to happen as you go throughout your life, and not everything has to be so personal. You can have, a bad 5 minutes does not equal a bad day unless you make it to be like that and take it, so, and pack it in so like personally and internally. And that's something that I really learned from the Four Agreements book. Don't take anything personally and just do your best. That's another agreement. Always do your best.
I haven't heard a Chicken Little reference in like long time. That was really cool. I just love that.
Right? I mean, I don't know where that came from, but I guess it was somewhere in my mind. Something that I really want to know about you and kind of the guests that you bring on and the audience you serve. What is your favorite area to really dive deep into on the Naked Wealth podcast?
That's a great question. It's really varies because it's whatever makes the guest super passionate and lights them up is really where I tend to get excited about. But I really, in overall, one of my core values, probably my two strongest, are integrity and relationships first. And I really am passionate, about having relationships with my clients. And part of why I do this is the podcast is developing relationships. I feel like I learn so much when I interview someone like yourself, and it allows me to connect. So as much as I wouldn't say it's necessarily even a topic that's my favorite thing about doing the podcast, or it's really that when I run into somebody who says, oh, my daughter's really like struggling with anxiety, I'm like, hey, I'm going to point them to your podcast. Or I had somebody on who works with women in the capacity where, if you're building a business and you have, under 100 employees, but you're really looking to grow and scale and need to kind of figure out how to put all the pieces together, then she really is a consultant for that. And so hey, you need to go talk to her. So it's really me building my resource network and just meeting awesome people with phenomenal stories. So that's what I really, really love. It's not necessarily topical as much as the relationship and the ability to connect people with people.
Yeah, I love that. The ability to connect people with people and building relationships. I'm the same way. I love building relationships with people. And that's where I've been able to see so much success too within Katura and the blog. I've been able to build relationships with, my audience and who I've been able to impact. So I feel like that is just so in alignment too with your podcast and what you do. So it's just been an honor to be invited to be a part of it.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Before we go, we will put everything into the show notes, but could you let the audience know where they can find you if they want to check out your blog or your social?
Absolutely. So my blog is unlimitedrefills.blog. And then on social, you can find me at Alyssa Young. Alyssa with ALYSSA was already taken. So mine is ALYSSAA, Young with an underscore.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Alyssa. Securities and advisory services are offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA, SIPC.